So I welcome everybody to our lecture series, most probably the last before the summer break. As many of you know, we have quite some events in front of us in Vienna with the conference in June and the summer school in July. But in case we manage to have one more lecture, of course, you will be informed over our channels. So it's my pleasure first to introduce our moderator for this evening, George Metakides, Professor Emeritus from the University of Patras and Honorary President of the Digital Enlightenment Forum. And noted also he holds several positions in European institutions, including the directorship of the ESPRIT program. So I think we cannot have someone better to moderate our lecture today, because it's also on a topic related to the European Union. And George, thank you very much, and I hand over to you.
Thank you, Stefan, and welcome everybody. It's a many-dimensional topic that we have in front of us today, and I'm happy that we have two good friends, personally speaking, who are members of the European Commission that many of you know from their central work at preparing the student projects during the digital humanism summer schools in Vienna and the last one in Africa. I will start with Monika. Monika is the head of unit for IT solutions at the Directorate General for European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations. It's a long title. But I would like to add to that Monika has strong bonds with TU Wien. She got her PhD at TU Wien. She was an assistant professor there until she joined the European Commission in 2009. And she continues to teach at TU Wien courses in semantic technologies and ontology alignment. Franco Accordino is the head of unit in investment in high-capacity networks in DigiConnect, that most of you know, where he draws on his extensive background in ontologies, data analytics, formal methods, and foresight methodologies to support the European Commission's policy of deployment and take-up of high-capacity digital infrastructures, which includes, of course, drones. The choreography for today will be roughly as follows. Franco will go first and take 12 minutes to describe for us the drone stack, from chips, from components, to platforms, to swarm intelligence, to onboard AI and autonomous systems. Monika will then take 8 minutes to take us through key application fields and the related challenges. And then both will join forces and give us the future outlook, unavoidably, I should add, touching upon the white elephant in the room, which is the military use of drones, which is transforming warfare and geopolitics as we speak, and of course interacts with the civilian applications on which most of today's presentation will be based. So with this, Franco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, George, colleagues, for this quite a nice introduction. Just a little update. Indeed, recently I moved. Now I'm responsible for a new unit that is responsible for connected intelligence systems. So it fits very well the scope of this lecture today. So quickly, you mentioned, George, before going to the summary. So before going to the summary, just allow me to say that indeed you mentioned, that drones are seen and are indeed more and more seen as a modern type of warfare that is indeed generated a lot of concerns in the population, but also in our defense infrastructures. So we have seen last week already a drone crashed on top of dual link in Romania, raising concerns of the type of reaction we should do after such events involving Article 5 of NATO or so. 1 month ago, we have seen, Georgia, not far away from you, Greek authorities discovering a surface maritime drone in the Aegean Sea, which apparently it was attributed initially to Ukrainian forces, showing this that drones are not just aerial, they can be also underwater or just on the surface of the sea, the ground. And also back early to this year, end of last year, I don't remember, we have seen a drone, a terrestrial drone, kind of a robot, taking a Russian position after crossing and navigating trenches in Ukrainian battlefield and neutralizing the Russian position. So all of these, of course, shows that it's not just aerial, but it's really about terrestrial, about underwater, and so on and so forth. And so it's not just about whether military dimension, because drones have quite impressive civilian applications. Monika will elaborate on that. So in a nutshell, we will speak about drone technologies quite rapidly, the use of the applications, the use cases, including dual use. Then we will look also at the overview of the drone market very quickly, where we show, of course, that we are not particularly strong as a union in this emerging market. Then we look at where we stand with the drone regulation, and this is very much close to with the core, discussions of today. That is, what are the implications of drone technologies in general on ourselves as individuals and ourselves as a society from an economic point of view, from a democratic control of populations and masses, etc., etc. All of these will be covered. So I need to click on this mouse because I have two mouses. Why they are important, the drones? First of all, because they are incorporating, really integrating, the point of integration between, let's say, the digital sphere and the physical space. So there is no better artifact that really embodies this paradigm of cyber-physical continuum, which is on one side very interesting from a technological point of view. At the same time, it is also harming. Then the drone is also important because it is the unique point where many technologies are indeed integrated with each other. From AI, for the connectivity layer, we will discuss about this, edge and cloud computing, IoT, robotics, and you name it. Then it's also quite fundamental, the aspect of the critical role of drones, not only because they can be used to protect, to do surveillance, for instance, of critical infrastructures, but because they can themselves represent a threat if they are not functioning well, or if they are somehow jumped and driven toward a particular target, generating chaos in the sky, for instance, around airports or whatever. All of those are critical infrastructure that depends also on the well functioning of drones, as much as, let's say, digital. It depends on the overall digital stack. I mean, today, digital infrastructures are critical by definition. They are kind of super meta infrastructures on top of which you will run the entire society, entire economy, and also democracy processes. So you understand that this is a quite sensitive element from a political point of view. And last but not least, they are important because they trigger and continuously societal transformation. There are elements of privacy, elements of governance, for instance, of the space where drones are moving around, which can be, as I said, also terrestrial. There are issues of human agency because they can be seen also as robots, or there are implications on jobs, for instance. But at the same time, drones have unique ability to make the world more efficient from an economic point of view, but also from, we can say, from an ecological point of view, because of the impact of possible energy saving or saving of pesticides when you're using the agriculture, etc., etc. So very, very strategic, and especially we will look really quite soon on the aspect of controlling this technology. This is absolutely key for the discussions of today. And before going there, of course, it's important to look a little bit, zoom in, let's say, the key components of drones. I will not elaborate too much on this. We can group, let's say, the various elements of a drone into 5 different categories. First of all, we have the 3 groups on the left side. We see the propellers. We see, of course, the motors. We see also the electronic speed controller. So all of these, in all of these, we can say that Europe is well prepared when it comes, in designing and producing a electric engine. We are quite good on that. Then we have the power, the batteries. Here is where we suffer some weaknesses, some chronic weaknesses for a number of reasons. So batteries are very important. There are, of course, currently lithium batteries are the norm. Of course, not all drones are powered by electric power, but can be also with the fuel, the combustion engines, etc. But of course, on this, we have to say that when it comes to the electric part, again, we are terribly dependent on China. Then we have, of course, all the aspects of communication that are fundamental. We can distinguish in between 2 different sets, that the positioning part, the GNSS, the GPS. Of course, this is very important, but also there are sensors that are capable of course, providing the drone with a certain degree of autonomy when the GPS signal or Galileo signal is missing because of spoofing or jamming. This can happen, of course, in war contexts, but it can also happen in civilian contexts. So the drones must be able to, for at least for a limited time, to sense and find its own position by using other sensors, including telemetries and other type of things. And then we have, of course, the more traditional connectivity layer with the 4G, 5G, and other type of wireless technologies, where, of course, we are quite good in Europe. We have an important industry on that. However, of course, even if just one single component on the 5G network is not trusted, then of course it can become a single point of failure. So those things are, especially when we deal with the critical infrastructure, become quite relevant. Then of course we have the various type of the menu of type of sensors, from the cameras with the more or less intelligent, smart abilities to analyze and pre-process images for image object recognition, etc. And then we have, of course, also lidars, radars, optical, various types of sensors. But what is the most important element of these artifacts, this complex artifact, is indeed the control unit. The control unit is what orchestrates the rest. It's the place where we run an operating system for this, and it can be bundled with other co-processing power, which can also embed, can host and process AI models that are fed by the data that are gathered by the drone itself, and doing the necessary data, sensor fusion and data fusion to have a coherent picture of the environment based on which the drone can act upon. Of course, there are many other components, but I think that's enough. Of course, we will distribute the slides, maybe even some background if necessary. But now let's try to contextualize the drone inside the broader diagram, which shows the so-called drone stack. Now, first of all, when we speak about the stack, we typically speak about 5 levels. So you can see them. We have, of course, the data. Data is, of course, an important asset in respect of the underlying hardware. It's what, let's say, feeds the algorithm, what gives, let's say, is the basis for taking decisions, to have a situational awareness of the environment, and of course to feed the decision making. Now, of course, there is so much variety of data that all of them have to be integrated and hosted and assessed in a very efficient manner. Some of this data, however, might not necessarily be located on the drone. Just little parenthesis. The left part of the slide is exactly what is on board. So it's a stack that is running on the drone, seen as a flying computer, basically. At the same time, you can see a car today, which is also software defined, which is virtualized, we can say like that. And we can see this as a kind of a computer with wheels. And the same, you can mirror this into modern robot platforms. Of course, this is not exactly the same type of technology, but they share a lot of key components. And I think this level of abstraction can be mirrored across the three types of technologies. Then, of course, below the data, there is the control, where they run the AI models, of course, that, of course, require some computing power. And here is where you have some edge computing capacity on board that can really take data via the communication layer, the connectivity layer, even from the broader context, which is shown on the right side of the slide, and integrate all together and feed, of course, the decision-making engine of the drone. And then, of course, there is the connectivity, as I said, that I will not repeat, in the hardware. Now, here, if we look at this part, we can see that on the hardware, we mostly suffer the dependence from non-EU, more or less high-risk supply chain. We will see this in a while. And of course, when we come to connectivity, we have their stronger players, but of course, for the onboard technology, sometimes we also there are dependent from foreign supply. Then compute, of course, there we know that we have a good players in Euroline NXP, we have STM Microelectronics, we have Infineon, but unfortunately, they suffered the stronger competition from non-EU suppliers. Here we speak more about the United States, NVIDIA, for instance, or we speak about Qualcomm, that have important capacity in Europe. However, of course, because of their national law, sometimes it would be better to be totally autonomous from that point of view. On the right side, of course, we have a more the wider stack with the edge nodes, with the cloud infrastructure. The edge nodes are also important to be present along the street if it is a terrestrial drone, but it can be in the U space, in the unmanned space. The satellite, we have seen that controlling the satellite is very important. You see, for instance, Starlink, let's say, various decisions that were determinant even for the course of the war operations in Ukraine. So we have many things, the AI factories and gigafactories. We are working on this in the Union to make things more autonomous. Now, when we contextualize the individual, we put it into a wider environment, individual drone device. Together with the other drones, we get what we call the drones. It's not just automatic. Drones, to act as a swarm, they need to be configured as such. And here, of course, their behavior is totally different than the autonomous drones that work in the standalone. So we have obviously the benefit of being in a swarm, more resilience and more scalability. The more drones you add in a swarm, the better the system performs, which is sometimes not obvious when you scale up systems. We have, of course, a more adaptive behavior, more energy efficiency, because you can delegate some part of the task to the nearest group of drones. But of course, you can imagine that this raises even more important questions as to the ability to govern these technologies, to protect ourselves from these technologies. So just to tell you, of course, we are working on say communications and then following up with the regulations to obviously make sure that that there is a preparedness for, of course, possible attacks. And here you have a possibility to use the connectivity infrastructure, for instance, the 5G, as overall a kind of a radar to detect the presence of drones. Of course, if the drones, individual drones, are powered with the SIM card, they are enrolled into the system, you can identify them. But this is very often not the case in case of war. So you need other more sophisticated technologies, including counterposing swarm of drones to swarm of drones. And there, of course, the battle is in the ability to react on the millisecond. And the latency matters here more than in every other place. So I close here, and there will be possibility to expand in case of questions. Monika.
Great,
Yes.
thank you, Franco. Monika.
Thank you very much. I think it takes a little while that the camera moves to me. I think it's working. So, well, it's very nice to talk to you about this topic because it's also not an easy topic, and we look forward to your critical remarks and comments. It was mentioned we are here in DG ECHO. I just would like to say that I'm not speaking on behalf of DG ECHO. I'm speaking in my personal capacity. So we have heard that drones are very often mentioned in the context of warfare. So not only since 2022, that Russia has started this terrible war against Ukraine. But also before, there were plenty of other conflictual situations all over the world, not to mention also some in Africa, where drones play, of course, a very important role. Now, IT was not always a peaceful business. We have seen, in fact, that the start of the internet, and I've put here just as a short reminder, you are, of course, very well aware of that, has started as a military project when in 1968 the ARPANET was created by what at that days was called Department of Defense. We know that it's not any longer defense, but something else now. And it was the research part of the military internet. There was another part that was called Milnet. But it was clearly a military infrastructure. And only a bit later, around 1970, 1971, and maybe 1969, we should mention the launch of CompuServe. And then 1971, when the first email has been sent, and FTP has started. And in fact, in 1971, when I was born, the internet became some kind of a civil application. So for me, it was all my lifetime something peaceful until recently. And I had also some years in cybersecurity, so I know, of course, that it's a battlefield. Now, while we tried, and it was mentioned that I have a link to the Vienna University of Technology, while we always tried there to stay far away from defense or from everything that is linked to military, we should confess that a lot of development came from that area. And maybe also nowadays, it's necessary to look into what is coming, the extreme innovation that is happening. You know about the situation in the Ukraine, how they drive the development of, and of course it's not their choice, but that they have to drive the development of drones. So if we want to at least take some make some use of that for civilian adaptation, we should look into what they have already built up especially on secure communication. Secure communication is very important also in the civil application. Also, resilient navigation. So it's important, and Franco mentioned earlier that the drones itself can become a danger because we are looking here into the integration with the physical world. So the resilient navigation that is important in military is equally important in a civilian application. Then we also want to see what type of sensors can it actually carry, and what kind of also thermal, infrared, and so on, other sensors can be included that would help in the situation of disaster, for example, to understand if an area is still safe to be entered or if a person cannot survive in that area. Linked to that is also the protection against all kind of weather hazards, so weather hardening. And then when it comes to integration into different operational environments, it's also important that there is interoperability, especially of command and control, so that a drone can be integrated in whatever different environment it is. Mention firefighters in Greece, or mention other first aid suppliers and so on. There should be, or we can take advantage of the modular open architecture. It's very important to offer possibilities for innovators, researchers, SMEs, and so on to build their applications around this architecture. And the autonomous logistics, which is in itself a huge area, because it's about moving goods, things around without having people doing that, but autonomously, automatically moving them around. So that was just meant to remember a bit that so many different innovation comes from military application. And for us, dual use was very long and maybe is still a very critical term. For my first 10 years in the Commission, dual use was something when it was raised, it was a kind of red flag. So we have seen, and should not hide, that there was in recent years, of course, a big change about the term of dual use. There is a specific part of the European Union that deals with the support to cooperative defense projects of member states, and that is the European Defense Agency. And they also have a lot of work on drones. They call it unmanned aircraft systems. And for example, I just looked into the webpage, and they have at the moment 11 ongoing projects in this field with an investment of 50 million. And while, of course, they mentioned first the function that they are more interested in, they also list here other parts like a disaster response, monitoring of natural disasters is very important, where application areas can be seen, and also where cooperation might happen. Now, we see drones very often in the context of wars, and for that reason, I've chosen a very different picture, as you can see here, because we tend to emotionally overcharge the term of drones. It can be everything. It depends a bit on also of how it is applied in the end, if it's applied for the good or for the bad. And we know that technology can always be applied for both sides. So if we want to see drones as a positive scenario, for example, for European humanitarian assistance, and also for helping in the situation of disasters, so to help the civil population, we should see it as a public interest infrastructure. And as Franco mentioned earlier, it's not only in the sky, as we can see in this nice picture, but also on the ground and in the water. And very important is that the drones are relatively cheap compared to other means we have. So we have helicopters, we have other possibilities to move, but drones are very, very cheap compared to other things. And they could be the first on scene. So if there is an emergency situation, they could be actually replacing the responders to check first if the situation is safe, that we could send somebody there. They could also bring the very first help, the first aid equipment, and they could also warn people. They could establish, and we know I'm saying could, but in fact all that is already done. So this is not something new. And when you look at the projects that are funded by the European Union, you can see actually that since at least 2016, or if not even earlier, there are many projects funded in this area. So this is already happening, and this is equally important to mention, and not only the war. So drones, in the interest of the common good, could reduce the time to action. They could reduce also the risk for first responders. They could especially help and can help to access remote communities, and they can also help to establish a communication where otherwise a communication would already fail. I've just chosen a few examples. You see the logos here on the right side of projects that have been already finished. And as mentioned, they can collect information, but they can also deliver vaccines, they can deliver defibrillators. So it's very important that it's done quickly. And as they are not stuck in a traffic jam typically, and as they can also travel where there are no streets, they can really bring a very big benefit. And I think that was my part, and I give back to Franco.
Thank you, Monika. Well, now it's both of you decide how to do it, but perhaps in the next 5 minutes or so, you can conclude with the future outlook.
Thank you, George. I think we are taking a bit longer than expected. So I'll proceed as much rapidly as possible. So a few words about the drone market. I think the numbers on the slide speak by themselves. It's a quite a steep increase of the market volume worldwide. In the annual compound annual growth rate is in the order of 15%, which means that really it goes quite steep, the curve. The question is, the European market is roughly 25% of the global market. The question is, which is very encouraging, point is it seen, the market seen from the demand perspective? We look at the supply perspective, the situation is pretty, I would say, dramatic. Let me be very honest with you, because we see that over 70% of the supply, if we look at the consumer and commercial segments, comes from China. So where Europe is still present is more when the drones are seen as weapons. Also on the military sub-segment, that we are still quite strong. So there is a quite important gap in the supply chain, not only in terms of segment or commercial segment like consumer and commercial, but also in the overall basic supply, like batteries, sensors, and other important components. Even the chassis. We want to look for a chassis for a trade. Nowadays, you have to buy China, basically. It's something that indeed could very easily be produced also in Europe. But for some mystery, for some magic reason in the market evolves like that. So there are quite important key demand drivers that you see there on the bottom of the slides. Next one tells us a bit the trends, the future perspective. As you can see, the curve is quite going up in terms of trajectories, with the one related to the European part, which remains still relatively flat. The main drivers, of course, you can see on the right part is autonomy and AI, embedding AI inside drones. Here, I think the idea is to shift the computational power and the processing power from the center, then the edge, and then onboard. So in this respect, there is a lot of research on low power consumption chips to be embedded. And here, of course, the idea is to lower and lower the reaction time. We have seen recently also, building on Ukraine lessons, the possibility to decrease the time to reaction. So time an event is recognized, then it is interpreted, and then the action is triggered on the effectors or actuators, going from minutes to really from 20 minutes to 3 minutes. So this is quite illustrative of the trends there and the main drivers. Then going toward the beyond visual line of sight. What is this? Is the ability to drive a drone beyond your visual scope. And to do this, of course, there is a lot about the regulation, which I'm going to say, but this opens perspectives in terms of commercial delivery. Monika mentioned a few examples in more application for the common societal good. But of course, we can also see these really like parcel delivery, for instance. We have seen already these scenarios already quite well presented even on the publicly by various hyperscalers like Amazon, for instance. But of course, from the idea down to making it happen, there is a big distance. Simply not only because of the technology itself. Theoretically, we could still do these things. But it's more in terms of course, the regulatory layer that we are going to address in a few moments. Of course, there is defense surge and the counter-drone market, which is also growing quite rapidly. There are opportunities, of course, ahead there, and I would say these at the end. There are the risks that I mentioned. The main risk is the one of really quite systemic dependency on non-EU controlled supply that could be discontinued or suspended at any moment. So we are speaking here really about the weaponization of the market. This is what's going on in this moment, basically, and we see in front of our eyes every day. Then, of course, there is also we need to be careful because states can apply export restrictions, making causing very truly crisis in terms of market, in terms of security, etc., etc. Now, a quick walk through the quite complex legislative regulatory and policy landscape that we have in the Union. Here, I don't want for once to make any, let's say, self-criticism, because I think we can be proud of at least the blue part. We have by far the most advanced and future-proof legislative layer in the world. We are the first to define use spaces, for instance. Use space, just to make it very clear, are basically where the drones are allowed to fly, but it's more than just that. It tells what are the characteristics that are to be provided by the spaces, because the space is not just the physical space, it's also whatever, we have seen it earlier, the stack, the outer stack, the external stack is part of the use space, because it is the entity then it gives that makes the identification of the drones, that makes the authorization to fly. And if you do have to do it semi-manually, like you do in the civil aviation domain, it takes ages for the drones, because also the scale of the number of drones that you have, you can only automate these decisions. Are you authorized or not to fly in a certain area where there is, of course, population, or in another area which is more rural, etc., etc. So our European regulation defines, first of all, the drones themselves, makes a categorization of the drones, where we have a different type of architectures that are, for instance, different categories, low risk type of drones with the minimal rules, typically below a certain weight, far away, with a certain distance, far away from the population. There are more, let's say, the ones that are requiring a specific authorization, where the risk is medium and manageable. In this case, the drones operators have to make a risk assessment in terms of, for instance, what would happen if it crashes on the ground, or what would be the risk of operating that particular service with the category of drone to the other drones or the normal civil aviation, for instance. All of these things are very well regulated and captured by the regulations that are there on the screen. And of course, then there are, this is about the devices. Then there are, of course, the higher category that is even more, let's say, there are more constraints to operate them. You need really a kind of authorization like you would basically get it for a normal aircraft, you see. So there are various levels. And of course, there is also the regulation of the space. And here you have the various functions the use space has to provide, as I said, the identification, authorization, but also how the drones can interoperate with the information coming from the use space, which means information about the entire traffic, but also information about the weather, about the fact that there is a particular critical situation, like a war, for instance, in a particular zone, etc., etc. So all of this is encoded, and if you want, even in principle, you can automate all of that. There is, of course, a big gap between the regulation, which is, I can tell you, very advanced, almost perfect, and the current state of implementation. But in principle, on paper, if you are an operator in Greece and you want to operate your drone in Germany, you can do that on the basis of European regulation. And I think this is really great. In the United States, in China, they only draft. They actually don't have this level of sophistication, of this level of regulation. Then, of course, this is about also the integration into the traffic management system, which I also covered, the green part, sorry. Then we have, of course, one layer of horizontal regulation, which is not natively for drones. The GDPR, for instance, or obviously the NIS2 architecture, and this is, none of these has been designed for drones, but it's applicable to drones because they are digital artifacts. Therefore, the AI, for instance, Act, or the Data Act, they apply definitely to the drones. But of course, their concrete applications is still quite an uncharted ground that we need to have some, perhaps, guidance on how to implement these things. Then we have, of course, the security and defense counter-drone aspect, which is relatively new, but we are developing more and more. One important element, of course, is the action plan on drone and counter-drone security. That has a lot of actions, but now, of course, we need to follow up, and maybe some of them will spawn into more or less binding legislative path that we need, of course, we are currently discussing these.
Franco, let's conclude in the next couple of minutes to allow for some questions.
Yes, that's my last slide, basically, and then I hand over for 1 minute. In essence, there are two different challenges and opportunities that can be separated, can be grouped into basically the technological ones and the governance ones. So the fact that the drones embody really the concept of cyber-physical convergence has a lot of repercussions. So we can use them for the good, the fact that we have a digital twins, the fact that we have the ability to see the world from the sky and look at what's going on. We can do quite a lot of virtualization there that, of course, might have a quite good or less good implications. So I think we identify a gap here where we need really to reflect more on what to do, because we could theoretically do a simulation of the real world and do anticipation of possible impacts of various events. We can test, for instance, policies before they are designed at the reflection time. We can, of course, assess the risks up front And of course, it's quite an opportunity, this part. But of course, we have important issue of sovereignty gaps. As I already said, we have very important deficiencies, important gaps, missing some blocks in the overall stack. The ideal situation is maybe in 5 years from now to make sure that Europe is present in each and every block. Not that we want the monopoly, of course, but we don't want to be absent either. So this is very important. And it's also a convergence opportunity, because when we speak about drones, we can translate the same reasoning or similar reasoning to cars and robots. So here, if we learn to control this stack for one, automatically we develop strengths for the other. So this is very important from a strategic and industrial policy point of view. And of course, we can leverage our regulatory excellence in this field, alongside the fact that we can think up front to new ways of governing the technology, governing the airspace, and of course, working also on the social legitimacy for the drone and acceptability. We can get more other type of capacities, skills, etc., etc. Monika?
Yes, and I go quickly to the end because I know we have really taken too much time. So you see here 2 pictures of that brings us a bit to the point. Also questions to you, namely when we want to integrate autonomous drones and also the virtualization that comes and the simulation of the world that comes with the drones in a good way. And also what actually is the world that we wish for. So I'm not going to read all the challenges that you see here on the left side. And I think we can finish with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monika. Thank you, Franco, for providing us with a framework within which we can try to follow what is happening so fast around us. So, with this, questions.
I think there was a comment already in the
Ronald?
Yeah, thank you, Franco. Thank you, Monika. Thank you, George. From the presentation, I noticed that when we are talking about the key areas for the drones, I needed to understand where we talk of human trust and governance layer, because when you look at, for example, the 2022 war, you look at a number of, you did talk of disruptions of GPS pooling and then signal jamming, but also you have to look at the element of vulnerability of those critical operations. Now, this leads me to the element of the liability and accountability.
Yeah, but keep the question short, please.
Okay, yeah. On the accountability, the EU policy does talk about countering drone threats, but ideally the liability and accountability section, I think Monika should help us speak to that. Thank you.
Okay. Monika, you want to react quickly?
I'm not completely sure if I got the point of the question. It was about countering drones, or no? Sorry.
No, it was more like the framework, but I think you covered it in your presentation. Eric, who also put something in the chat about how do we avoid having drones hijacked, just like cars can be. Eric.
Yes, basically that's my question. Basically, and even the other way around, as our semi-autonomous systems, such as cars, as they become more and more part of the software layer and remotely connected, there's the question who actually is in power of those systems. And what I'm missing today is basically a safety net, a safety layer that makes these systems kind of usable, even if, let's say, a person somewhere else decides that they can no longer be used. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Good question. Which one of you wants to respond quickly, Franco or Monika? One of the two.
of course, I mean, you said very clearly. I mean, it's the virtualization or softwareization of the device that opens a lot of different scenarios where the liability, responsibility, accountability elements become blurred. Because when we switch between one layer and the other, automatically we switch about the suppliers of those layers, right? So, and as everything becomes, now integrated also vertically, becomes difficult to trace back where the fault was. If it was deliberately because of the human intention, therefore the responsibility was with the operator, or if it's something that, in spite of the operator good intention, the device acted badly, or if, let's say, because of the partial autonomy, or as you called it, basically it was the algorithm or the model that, differential model, for instance, that worked very badly and then gave the wrong action to do. All of this is currently very subject to discussion, actually, for cars and as well as for drones. So we don't have an answer to this. For the time being, we generally speaking, we look at the current regulation, the operator bears all the responsibility, but it's most of the responsibility. But we need a better framing of this. We have to recognize it.
And may I just add, I don't think that we will ever be completely able to avoid a situation where some cybersecurity attack is done on a car or whatever device it is, because in the end it is a computer, and the same issues that happen with our computers might also happen then with anything that is computerized. The impact is indeed bigger if we are so vulnerable, because our life somehow is linked to this computer. But already this is happening today with devices that are implanted in the body, for example, to help the heart beating. Sometimes these devices can be hacked and can also be stopped by others. So we should not be naive that we will be really fully controlling that. We can limit that, and probably this will be the big battle of tomorrow, to protect all the numerous devices that we put in our world.
Yes, and of course it all depends on what we consider acceptable risks in all these cases. Hannes.
Thanks first for the good presentation, the insightful, Franco and Monika. I have many questions. I just make two because I see George looking very, very seriously. The first one is how autonomous are these systems? Because you spoke about autonomous systems, but most of the time there's a human behind it. And the second question is a very provocative one. As I have understood your presentation, we are in the AI field, we are dependent from the US, and in the drone field, we are dependent from China. Is this a good summary?
I think
we are dependent would be an even shorter summary. Monika, quickly.
So, first of all, on these, to cut it very short, I think it's true that, of course, if we look at the stack, on the AI models, when it comes really to the foundational models, the US lead because they have the computing power, but now we are gradually catching up. So the fact that we are establishing the AI gigafactories all around Europe, the first one we should see the light soon in Germany, in Jülich. Then there would be 5 more others all around Europe. If federated, that would be a really great assets on which to develop foundational models. Then, of course, when it comes to the actual models that you need to fly or to drive an autonomous car, then they need some customization and feeding with the specific data, contextual data, more specific data to make them very accurate. Just to make it level, make it, let's say, more clear. For an autonomous car, you have to really build a model that is customized to a city. And here is where we are strong. We are strong because the data, they don't have, let's say, they don't need a specific, let's say, technological, let's say, advance. Data, you have a jurisdiction on data. If you have the data, you have already the primary asset to develop your strengths. And the data are with us. So if one day we need to do a model for the city of Vienna, for instance, whether it is aerial or on road, it's Vienna who owns the data, right? And with this one, we can make it as much strong as we want to model. Then we decide what to do with the data. If we share them or there is someone who is exploiting them commercially, this is our decision. So I would not be so negative for concerning the AI level because we are gradually catching up.
Sorry if I interrupt you, Franco. I do not believe your words here, but let's go to the drones, please.
Well, to the drones, of course, the components and the batteries there, we have a critical dependency. This is really far more serious for me than the other one. Because here, you cannot, either we have a major disruptive, let's say, major breakthrough in the underlying technology. So we go on the atomic or toward different type of graphene type of materials, but then we need to wait for another 10 years probably until commercialization. Or we really need to play with other possible international partners where we have some rare earth material that can fit our basic value chain. Namely, for instance, I don't know, Australia, Canada, there are more like-minded countries that with whom we can partner. And of course, look at the United States and China, not as our enemy, but our competitors, of course, and work in this respect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Franco. Thank you both for this presentation. It's an area that is going to transform itself very rapidly in the next months and years. So this was a very useful presentation to help us understand what is happening and follow it. So with this, over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, George. Also, thanks from my side, Monika and Franco. So it's time for music. In the end, Monika, do you want to say a few words about the selection? Or is it Peter?
Yes, thanks. So we have chosen a piece from a movie that was directed in 1926 and then came out in 1927. And in some reception, it was called How They Believe the World of 2026 Will Look Like. And it's about the complicated relation between machine and human. And thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great. And before I play it, let me just quickly make the comment about the two events, because Stefan mentioned this at the beginning already, that this might be this is the last lecture of this season, basically, but we have still very much a decompact June and July ahead of us. So June 24th to 26th, the next edition of the Digital Humanism Conference will take place in Vienna at the Austrian Academy of Sciences, together with a number of satellite events. And this year's motto is Orientation in Turbulent Times. And in July, the week of 6th to 10th, the 5th ACM Europe Digital Humanism Summer School will take place in Vienna. Here, the central topic is democracy in the digital age. And both have very good programs, and hopefully you can join us. So see you in Vienna, and in any case, have a nice summer. And well, also from my side, thanks to Franco and Monika, and also for George for the moderation. So we'll have Der Maschinenmensch from Metropolis now, and giving this season of lectures a somewhat dramatic finale. Enjoy. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
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 Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.